Evan, the only thing is I can't see people's hands, so just let me know if people have their hands up or what have you.
Okay, we'll help you out with that.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristen.
Okay, so we're live on YouTube now, and we can get started.
Okay. So we're going to call this meeting to order. We're first going to do our land acknowledgement. So we begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This treaty is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendships of Indigenous peoples. So we're going to have the adoption of the agenda, and I'm going to ask the Deputy Clerk.
So we do have some amendments to the agenda for this evening. The first is removal of item 8.4, report from FMS regarding the 2021 capital budget council priority requests. The report will be brought forward at a future meeting, and Christine Douglas will provide information on that in a moment. At last night's meeting, a portion of a motion moved by Councillor Littleton regarding ICIP funding was referred to today's meeting. However, with the removal of the capital budget report from the agenda, this motion is going to be coming forward at the meeting that the capital budget discussion happens. Councillor Littleton has also requested that item 7.4, sub item 3, that's correspondence from the Queenston neighbors, be pulled from the correspondence list and come back on the correspondence list when that budget and ICIP motion come forward. As item 8.4 will be coming back at another meeting, Mike Gallagher will no longer be making a delegation this evening, and he will make a delegation at a future meeting.
Okay, and we look to the Director of Financial Management Services to provide background information on the removal of 8.4.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. On August the 5th, the Federal Minister of Infrastructure and Communities announced the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, ICIP, with a new temporary COVID-19 resilience stream. The maximum size of projects under the stream is set at 10 million total eligible costs. For projects under the COVID-19 resilience stream, the maximum federal contribution from all sources will be up to 80% for municipalities. Projects also need to be completed by the end of 2021. With projects needing to be completed by the end of 2021, staff worked quickly to ensure that the city would be prepared with a solid application due to the extremely tight timelines. On Friday, November 6th, the Ministry of Infrastructure released municipal allocations under the ICIP COVID-19 resilience stream. The city's allocation is significantly different than anticipated. Therefore, staff would like to take the opportunity to go back and review the 2021 capital budget and to reprioritize and to return to the committee at a future date. In addition, the ministry has indicated that the application materials, that is the application forms, program guidelines, and federal environmental assessment duty of consult forms will become available on the TPON website once the stream has officially launched the week of November the 16th. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I see Chair Cisco has joined us, so we'll just get the agenda moved and then have him take over. Are there any other amendments to today's agenda?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councillor Garcia?
Yes, just a question. I would appreciate your advice, and maybe Chair Cisco. When looking through the agenda, I thought sequentially, for myself anyway, it made more sense to discuss 8.2 before 8.1, because 8.2 covers all the details of the departmental budgets, and then 8.1 looks at more of a summary. I'm okay either way, but if you're okay, I would prefer to have it in that sequence.
Maybe I'll ask the Director of Financial Management Services, maybe why they're in that order.
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. With regards to this evening's agenda, item 8.1 is providing additional information with results of the presentations that have been received by the committee and does show the overall picture. There is a preliminary presentation, and then once the presentation is complete, then the committee may ask questions on both items 8.1 and 8.2.
Okay, that's okay with me then, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Garcia. Is there any other amendments to today's agenda?
Councillor Townsend does have his hand up.
Okay, Councillor Townsend, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to pull 7.3 that's from the town hall, refer it back to staff, just in regards to the last question there, number 4, the guided question. There was a mistake, an error made on the question in terms to revenue, which should have actually been used as assessment. So I wanted to pull that, refer back to get that changed or pulled out.
So
Okay.
Councillor Littleton might not know this at this point, but that item has been pulled already by a councillor. So during item 6, we would identify that Councillor Garcia has requested to pull that item already.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Townsend. Are there any other amendments to today's agenda? Okay, seeing none.
Miller's hand is up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Miller. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry if I'm cutting out. I just wanted to pull 7.1. I just have a question. It's a question I can ask offline, but I would prefer to ask it in public. So it's just going to be really brief.
Okay, so 7.1 then becomes 8.6. 8.6. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Is there anyone else? Okay, moving the motion to adopt the agenda, I have Councillor Porter. Okay, can I ask for someone to move the agenda then?
Looks like Councillor Phillips and Councillor Garcia have their hands up.
Okay, great. All in favor? Is there anyone opposed? No.
No
Okay,
hands.
that's carried. Okay, thank you. And I'll turn the meeting over to Councillor Cisco. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton, and I will profusely apologize to everybody. For those who aren't aware, today is Elementary Report Card Progress Report Day, and I may have been caught up dealing with an elementary progress report and a young student who is going to have an earlier bedtime tonight. And I sincerely apologize to everybody for making a mistake with respect to the time because of that. And I would like to thank Evan McGinty for sending out an email at 5:29 indicating that the meeting started at 5:30. With that, again, I apologize profusely. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest today? I'm just looking for any hands up and seeing none. I will remind everybody, if you do have any declarations of pecuniary interest, you're to submit written statements of declarations to the Deputy Clerk. Chair's report, I'm going to be very brief this evening because we have a full agenda. I will say I appreciate all the work that's been done by staff over the last couple of weeks to get reports put together, specifically with respect to 8.1 and the one-time non-structural items in the 2021 draft operating budget. I will be asking when we get to that time that we look to use some of our reserves for those one-time issues, those non-structural items in the 2021 draft operating budget, but I will save that until we get to item 8.2 on the agenda. The following reports have been requested to be removed from consent to discussion. Item 7.3, which is the 2021 operating budget, the telephone town hall public engagement results, and that was from Councillor Garcia. And we also have item 7.1, corporate support services, human resources, becoming a living wage employer follow-up, and that's from Councillor Miller. So those have been added to the agenda as items 8.5 and 8.6 respectively. With that, we have a motion that the general committee approve the consent agenda, save and accept those items which were brought forward for discussion. And moving that, I believe I have Councillor Littleton. All right. All those in favor? Opposed? And that appears to be carried. So if I can look to the clerk to just read out the remaining Items on the consent agenda?
The consent agenda is 7.2, legal and clerk services, expense policy for advisory committee and task force members. Item 7.4, legal and clerk services, general committee correspondence, save and accept sub item 3.
All right. And then I say we have to go for 2 recorded votes, so I apologize. I jumped ahead to the deputy city clerk. If we can have a recorded vote.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Porter, Councillor Porter, Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Mayor Sensic,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Cisco,
Yes.
and that's carried.
All right, we're moving on to the discussion reports and item 8.1, financial management services, the director, preliminary estimate for the 2021 city tax rate and one-time non-structural items in the 2021 draft operating budget. And I will call on Christine Douglas, the director of financial management services, and our treasurer to present. Ms. Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, members of council, city, and public via Zoom and YouTube. Tonight, I will provide a recap of the 2021 operating budget information presented on October 21st and some additional information on the current position of the city's 2021 operating budget. As presented at the October 21st General Committee meeting, the total costs less non-tax revenues to maintain the city services in 2021 before including outside boards and commissions is $92.7 million, which represents an increase of 5.42% from 2020. The city's 2021 operating budget has been significantly impacted by COVID-19 as indicated by the large purple section. On October 26th, the city's outside boards and commission presented their 2021 operating budgets to committee. Here's a snapshot of the city's departmental, outside boards and commissions, and non-tax revenues for 2021. City departmental expenditures, including debt payments, are increasing by 3.8%, including the city's outside boards and commissions, which are the St. Catharines Public Library, the St. Catharines Transit Commission, the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre, and the Niagara District Airport combined are also increasing by 3.8% from 2020. Factoring in non-tax revenues, which are decreasing by 9.53%, results in a total net expenditure increase for 2021 of 5.11%. As indicated on October 21st and earlier this evening, the city's 2021 operating budget has been significantly impacted by COVID-19. Similar to previous years, looking at city departmental budgets only and without considering the impact of COVID-19 or debt payments, these expenditures would essentially equate to a 0% increase from 2020. The city departments make up the corporation of the City of St. Catharines. Each department supports the others, and no one department can achieve its goals and objectives without the collaboration of others. Therefore, we look at the expenditure impact of the entire corporation and not just individual departments. When we include the annual debt payments, expenditures increase by 0.76% from 2020. Including the impact of COVID-19, expenditures would increase to the 3.8%. Finally, including the outside boards and commissions, the 2021 expenditure increase over 2020 would remain at the 3.8%. Looking at the 2021 city expenditures, including the outside boards and commissions, in a different way, the total expenditures for 2021 of $123.75 million support the various services provided by the city, such as fire protection, roads and walkways, transit and paratransit, parks, libraries, cemeteries, arenas, planning and building, and economic development. The city provides hundreds of services to our citizens that are all important to different members of our community. Let's see how these estimated expenditures impact the median household. Using the estimated assessment values provided by MPAC, the $114 million is divided by the city's taxable assessment. For the median household with an assessment value of $254,000, the city portion of taxes in 2021 is $1,685.38, an increase of $73.55 or 4.56%. Committee members will note that the current value assessment for the median home has not increased for 2021. This is due to MPAC not moving forward with the scheduled reassessment cycle for the next 4-year period. Therefore, the median home CVA remains at the same amount as 2020. In addition to collecting our own property taxes, the city is also responsible for collecting the tax dollars on behalf of the Region of Niagara and the local school boards, although the region and the province set their own rates. We are unable to show the total impact on the median household for 2021 at this time, as the Region of Niagara has not yet approved their 2021 budget. As well, the education rates have not been determined by the province for 2021. As previously discussed, COVID-19 is having a significant impact on the city's 2021 operating budget. As requested by committee, shown here are on a summary basis are the one-time non-structural items in the 2021 operating budget allocated into 3 buckets. The COVID-19 related items totaling $2.82 million, non-COVID related items totaling $40,856, and level A items from the October 21st report total $172,550. Full details of these 3 buckets of items are available in Appendix 1 of the committee report FMS 160-2020. On October 21st, staff presented the city's 2021 capital and operating budgets at the same time to the committee. This was done due to the challenges that COVID-19 has placed upon the operating budget. One of the ways that staff have mitigated the impact on the operating budget is the reduction of the tax levy support in 2 areas. Shown in the top of this chart is the capital out of revenue being reduced from 10% to 5%. This refers to the support of capital projects that have a portion funded by debt. Historically, these projects were funded with 10% of tax levy support. To mitigate the impact of the operating budget, this has been reduced to 5% for 2021. The second way was the reduction of the taxpayer support for the road program. These reductions are intended to be temporary, with expectation that this support return to the pre-COVID levels by 2024. For 2021, these reductions in contributions to capital are offset by increasing funding from the gas tax, reallocation of prior year surpluses, as well as increase in debt. Shown visually here is how the capital and the operating budgets are very interrelated. The operating budget provides direct funding to the capital budget through 3 main areas: the capital out of revenue charges, the reserve funding, and direct support for the roads and sidewalk capital program. The relationship goes the other way too, with the operating budget funding the debt services on the debt issued to the capital projects. Any funding reductions to the capital budget, other than the capital out of revenue or the tax support for the roads and sidewalk capital programs, will not have an impact on the 2021 operating budget. Here we see a summary of the impact of the 2021 operating budget changes from 2020. This is based on the total expenditures less non-tax revenues. After incorporating the impact of the city's base, non-discretionary and discretionary items, changes total 0.48%. The large purple or middle section of this bar graph is COVID-19 related changes, which are 4.24 million or 3.91%. The final section of the graph represents the impact of the city's outside boards and commissions, which equals 0.72% increase over 2020. When all these amounts are tallied, the city's total net expenditures less non-tax revenues for 2021 equal 114.1 million, which is an increase of 5.11%. This translates to an impact on the median household of $73.55 or 4.56%. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my presentation on the city's 2021 draft city operating budget.
All right, thank you, Ms. Douglas, for that presentation. I'm now going to look to council, and if I can ask someone to make a motion to receive the information. Councillor Phillips and Councillor Littleton, seconded by So the motion is that report FMS 160-2020 regarding preliminary estimate of the 2021 city tax rate and one-time / non-structure items in the draft 2021 operating budget be received for information forthwith. Are there any questions with respect to this report? And I will remind everybody, if I could ask you to use the raise hand button just so that I can see who is looking. All right, I am seeing, Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Chair. Recognizing you, my question is for the Director of Finance, Director Douglas. So if it's $73 on a home that's assessed at $250,000, would it be a fair deduction to say that a home that is assessed at approximately $500,000 would have to pay $500,000 would have to pay double that, and a home assessed at $750,000 would have to pay approximately 3 times the $73? Would that be fair?
Ms. Douglas?
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I would say that what you would want to do when you're looking at a home's impact from one year to the next, you would need to start with what the home was assessed at in 2020 and compare that. So I don't think that I could say that it would be completely accurate to say that a home that is assessed at like 500,000 would be double the amount, because in actuality is actually you need to be multiplying the tax rates by the actual assessment. So the changes would differentiate, and I would not want to speculate that without doing the complete calculation.
Okay, so then this would just be our baseline then. Okay, great. And then we would still, and recognizing you, Chair, one final question. We still have to wait for the region's taxes and the school board taxes as well, as you indicated, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in the past number of years when we've had the city's operating budget before council before the end of the year, we don't typically have the regional tax rates nor the provincial tax rates. So we have been moving forward without that complete information. We have seen education rates decreasing in recent years. So that often has a positive impact. And with regards to the regional tax rates, we don't have an estimate at this time with regards to where the regional budget would sit for 2021. I would not recommend that we wait for those pieces of information. We can always report back that information, because also the regional tax policy is not typically approved until the month of February. So that would further delay the approval of the city's budget if we were to wait for those additional pieces of information.
Thank you. And Chair, with your permission, please, just one final question, and I hope that we can get an answer to it. To the Director of Finance, Director Douglas, can you give us an update on the Phase 2 application, the funding from the provincial government? Do we have an update on that, Director Douglas?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. The city's deadline to submit was last Friday, November the 6th. We did submit that deadline. We did hear back from the province actually on Saturday, late in the day, with some additional questions, and we have until tomorrow to respond with those questions to the province. So I think it's positive to see how quickly the province is looking at those funding applications. And at the next meeting, staff will be providing the Q3 year-to-date variance report and year-end forecast, so we will provide additional information at that time. However, I do not expect to receive information with regards to any success on the Safe Restart funding application until later. All we've been guaranteed is that we will hear before the end of this calendar year. So
that's great. Thank you, Director, and thank you, Chair Cisco.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Sorrento. We're now going to Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, an overall procedural question. I know that the report, the same as the next report, identify that the guidance that was approved by the BSC and by council, and then what is being proposed, of course, exceeds that guidance for a number of reasons, including COVID, of course. But just to be clear, since that was approved by council, will that require a specific approval by council to contravene that guidance?
I'll take that through the chair. I think the guidance is what the staff are supposed to follow in developing the budget documents. At this stage, we're very far along in the process and have been advising council and general committee and budget committee throughout the process of where we are and what is building the budget. So I would not say a reconsideration would be required to approve the budget beyond the guidance. I think guidance is just that it's a guide, try to work towards this, but obviously there's amendments that come in, including amendments from council that get added in that make us go beyond that guidance.
And I will just add, Councillor, I think it's a fair question. I will add though, at the end of, and I'm going to apologize that I'm not sure, I believe it's FMS 143-2020. There are a list of, there's an appendix at the very end of the document which indicates other changes to the budget which could get to the numbers that were indicated by council. Some of them or possibilities. So I think in terms of the spirit of the guidance, that information is presented, but staff gave us the budget that they felt met the other requirements that have been indicated by council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I did see those other items and potential mitigation and so on. Will we be discussing that under the next item or under this item?
We will be discussing that under the item. This is very much for information purposes and to inform the next one. So if you have questions related to that appendix and those possible changes, that would be best left for 8.2. Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia and Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just for if there's press watching or people who are watching online, Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, but the actual increase as far as staff, departments, and the ABCs is actually between 1.6 or 1.5 and 1.6%. The rest of it's coming from COVID. That's correct. Am I correct in saying that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that would be correct.
Yeah, so with that, I mean, when we discussed very early in the goings on of this year's budget, we asked staff to show us what zero will look like. And then the mayor said, well, add 1% and 2%. So in actuality, the staff did come in under the 2%. And obviously we didn't know what COVID was going to do. And it is definitely a hit, but I commend staff. And, you know, if it wasn't for COVID, we'd be championing a budget increase of less than 2%. So kudos to you. And as far as, well, we don't have anything, we can't do anything else with COVID. We can't really cut back on COVID, that's for sure. So I just wanted to make clear that you were under the 2%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. And I think your suggestion, if we could cut back on COVID, I think we would all be quite happy to do so. One thing I did want to raise, and I do appreciate staff going through the budget. This is a very different budget from what we have seen in the past, in that there are a number of one-time and non-structural items contained within it. The reasoning behind asking for this originally is a conversation between myself and Councillor Littleton, a recognition that those are one-time costs, and those one-time costs, we've talked in the past, and I think council's done a very good job of holding off on using reserves for structural items, things that are in the budget year to year, because using a reserve on something that's going to show up again next year just delays the inevitable increase. Given that a lot of these, a large portion of it, as Councillor Phillips indicated, is one time, either a revenue deduction or an increased cost because of COVID-19, I think it behooves us to discuss the possibility of using our reserves, which we do have some of, and that'll come up in 8.2. Mayor Sendzik, you had comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in relation, I want to spend a bit of time on 8.1 because I think it's very informative. And I know council's had an opportunity to review, but it is somewhat ambiguous in terms of you got one-time non-reoccurring impact, and then beside it, so I'm dealing with Appendix 1, and then you have impact continues beyond 2021. So just in terms of a better understanding, as I think it's important that we get a handle on what the impact of COVID is, and you look at some of these related items, and I'll look at interest income. So if Director Douglas can explain item number 11, which is non-tax revenue, it would appear to be one-time, no non-reoccurring impact, that there is no impact. But if Director Douglas, because there's a zero there's a dash, which indicates that there's nothing changing there. But if Director Douglas can explain that.
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the non-tax revenue interest income line item in the city's operating budget, in the budget, when we compare the amount in 2020 to 2021, there is a decrease of $455,000. The main reason for that decline is that with the Bank of Canada decreasing interest rates 3 times in 2020, and now that we are at an all-time low of 0.25% of interest rate on investments, and the majority of the city's investments are held in GICs or high interest savings account, we are expecting to see a decline in the amount of interest income that the city does earn. When we listened to the Bank of Canada governor back on October the 28th, he indicated that he is not likely to see an increase in interest rates until at least 2023. So therefore, staff is being conservative in our estimate that with regards to the impact on interest income, and that we are not expecting to see interest income that the city earns on our investments in our high interest savings account improving in 2021 or 2022 following the Bank of Canada governor's guidance of it changing in 2023. So for that reason, we have indicated that it isn't, in staff's opinion, a one-time non-recurring item, that we will continue to see interest income to be low in 2021 and 2022.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Director Douglas. And I think it's important for council to see that, because we often, you hear in the community that the city's not impacted by COVID-19, and we don't have people who are laid off, but we're just like any other business. So here's interest income, and that would be approximately almost 0.5 of per percentage point on a taxation rate that we have lost to interest rates. So beyond our control, and yet this is lost revenue that, just like other businesses in our community that are being impacted by COVID-19, here's a significant portion. So that's 0.5% that we're losing, and that's projected another 0.5% being lost in 2022. So I think it's important for council to see some of the other areas that we're being challenged on non-tax revenue that comes in. In terms of, we could look at the same with penalty and interest on taxation. So if Director Douglas, on that same section under non-tax revenues, point 14, explain that one as well, because it is an estimation, and as council we can challenge on the estimates, but I think it's important for Director Douglas to explain why is $254,000 being listed in here as one-time impact on COVID.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to penalty and interest on taxes, this is the penalty and interest that the city charges on our outstanding taxes. And as we experienced early in this year, there was an interest waiving period of time for 3 months to provide some relief to our taxpayers. So with staff being uncertain as to what could potentially happen with the pandemic as we look forward into 2021, we have estimated that some of the investment, or not the investment, but the penalty and interest income on taxes could potentially be utilized by council should they decide to provide some assistance to taxpayers in 2021 in the form of penalty and interest waiver, similar to what they did in 2020 early in the pandemic onset. So we are anticipating that some of that could potentially be used by that way by council should they desire, but then also looking at it and seeing that there may be some additional impact carried on in future years as we continue to work with our taxpayers and make payment arrangements for their outstanding taxes.
Okay, thank you, Director Douglas. And again, through the chair, it's another way of showing the broader public how we're preparing for what could be some economic turbulence around the ability for people to pay their taxes. So again, we're being prudent, and this is an example of being prudent. Could we work with that number? Could we lower it? That would be council's decision. Is if you want to lower our threshold, that could potentially have an impact on the ability to pay for ratepayers who are struggling through some of these related economic issues. But that's an example of, that's not an inconsequential amount of money. It's a significant amount. And Mr. Chair, as we go through a couple of the other ones, I'm going to ask a couple additional questions. Rates and fees revenue. So you go to number 24 on this list, and now you have transfer to parking services reserve. That's a big number. It's $1 million. And in terms of explaining that, Director Douglas, is there space in that amount that it's overtly, I don't want to use the word generous, but overtly conservative, that could be adjusted if we want to look at some of the larger dollar amounts that are being put into the budget?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. This particular item is with references the city's parking services reserve. So similar to water and wastewater rates, parking services has a separate rate structure and a separate budget. So with the impact of COVID, when we saw many employees in the downtown working from home as well, so they didn't require their city parking spaces, as well as there wasn't as many violations, infractions, because there was less traffic on the roads. The city's parking reserve has been significantly impacted, both through revenues and violation in revenue lines. Then on the expenditure side, we did reduce our amount of enforcement, but there was a need to still continue to enforce, even when we weren't charging for parking for serious violations such as fire route infractions, accessible permits, and those types of items. So there was still costs being incurred. So therefore, we are being impacted significantly in this reserve. It is anticipated that with the impact of COVID, that the reserve balance, which we forecasted at the end of 2020 to have a balance of approximately $742,000, that balance will be largely eliminated to offset the impact of COVID. We have allocated some of our phase 1 Safe Restart money to parking services to mitigate that amount. So potentially there could be some dollars available in the parking services, not requiring as much support from the tax levy budget. If this amount were to be reduced, it does put some pressure on the parking services to meet our revenue and minimize our expenditures to ensure it stays in a positive position. However, should we not be able to do that with additional revenue sources and expenditure reductions, then we will continue to see in future years there being pressure on the tax levy budget to support the parking services budget.
Okay. So I think it's helpful for council to, thank you, Director Douglas. It's helpful for council to see that we should be paying attention to some of these numbers and just seeing where where the real risk is. I can get into more detail, and I was hoping that we would spend more time on 8.1 and just walk through some of these. But when you look at number 27, it talks about beaches, and that's $60,000. So that's ongoing. Is that related to security on the beaches? Because it talks about cleaning protocols, but I think it's more security.
Yeah, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, you are correct. That is actually the security that the city is anticipating continuing to require at the city beaches. And I'm not sure if Director Smith has any further comments with regards to that item.
No, you've covered it off through you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, sorry, just to butt in a little bit on this one. Council is also aware that we have a task force that's going to be meeting to talk about beaches specifically, and security and custodial and a variety of other options are going to be looked at and brought forward to council. So the intent would be for 2021 to have a more robust strategy for the beaches, but there will be an associated cost to that and possible revenues as well. But this is really an attempt to put in a dollar value that we're going to have to incur in 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Deputy CEO. I think it's important that when we understand what these costs are, so that we can better decide where we think as a council that we can work with staff on where the funds can be allocated. So, Mr. Chair, I do have motions that I would like to bring forward as we get through, I think, 8.2, just some structural things that we can talk about. And I will leave it at that for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Sendzik. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. I think I'll direct this one to the Director of Municipal Works. I noticed green fees were down at the municipal golf course. And I'm not sure if this is you or Director Christie who could answer this question. I think that other private golf courses have increased their fees because of COVID and just the operating costs. Do you think there's value in having us consider an increase in fees at the golf course? Is there anything else we can do at the golf course?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have discussed that previously with respect to potentially increasing fees or putting in a COVID fee with respect to, recognizing that it's costing us more to run the golf course because of that. That is certainly something that if this committee so directs, we can look at. We were under the direction to keep our fees at the same for 2021. So that's what we did with respect to our calculations. But it is something that we could look at if that's the wish of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Through you to the CAO and the Director of Finance, have staff come up with any other, there's a lot of cost-cutting measures, but are there any other ways that you think that we could increase fees or increase revenue somewhere? I'm not seeing a lot of that here, just in terms of adding parking in various spots. Has staff considered that in the operating budget?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor with regards to looking at additional revenue sources. As the Deputy CAO indicated, the task force that is looking at our beaches and the operations of our beaches, one of the items that is being discussed within that group is the possibility of looking at parking charges for both of the city beaches. With the addition of parking charges, there does also come the need for enforcement. So staff are, currently working through that information, as well. When it comes to revenue sources for, for municipalities, there are not a lot of options, and it often is a delicate balance. As we have seen throughout COVID, the more types of rate and fee type revenues that the city does have, when we experience a situation such as COVID, when we need to shutter our facilities, then we're not collecting those revenues. However, there still are some of the operational costs that do remain with that. So, but staff do, review our rates and fees. I know myself and many of the directors are parts of professional municipal organizations, and even the area treasurer group, and we do talk with each other about different options that are available to us. It's not an operating budget stream, but we are in the middle of going through, a development charge study and community benefit charge study, and that will generate some revenues for our capital, which, when you look at that, there may be some type of ability for us to lessen the amount of the tax levy support that we have to have to transfer to the capital budget. So that may provide some relief within the tax levy budget down the road once those plans and studies come forward to council and are approved.
Okay, thank you. I will be requesting just a memo from staff related to the green fees at the municipal golf course, to see if they could come back with potential options to help cover the costs related to COVID. I think people tend to be, golf is on the decline, but with COVID, people seem to be golfing more right now because you can social distance and get some exercise out there. But I do think it's there. We need to look at cost recovery.
All right, thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, golf is on the incline, for one. More and more people have gone out to golf during this time, as I've been out golfing, and I've seen the waits. So my question, though, is similar to actually what Councillor Porter asked. My question is about on-street parking. I know some municipalities charge for parking permits. I know that we, in some neighborhoods in the city, I believe we do charge parking for on-street parking permits. I'm wondering if that is an avenue that staff have looked into in order to generate other types of revenue.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. You are correct that there are certain areas within the city where we do permit residents to purchase an annual permit to park on the street. We do need to balance that usage of the on-street parking with the space available on our streets, and with the increase in active transportation and the use of bicycle lanes and those types of things, we need to make sure that we aren't overcrowding the streets, and that the streets are still passable. And I'm not sure if either Director Martuccio or Director Smith have any further comments with regards to the impact on their operations with additional residential parking on streets.
through you, Mr. Chair, from an operations perspective, there can be operational impacts depending on where the parking is located with respect to infrastructure, but for the most part, they can be dealt with as a on needed basis.
So the reason I bring this up is in my ward specific, I can think of an example, and that there is an apartment building, a number of apartment buildings, and where residents can pay $60 a month to pay in the apartment complex, or they can park for free on the streets. I'm trying to understand why we haven't looked into scenarios where, you know, residents are essentially clogging up parking on the street. And we saw it quite clearly yesterday from our municipal works department when it comes to snowfall, and seeing some of the snowplows and the difficulties they have in maneuvering around these cars. It was interesting because during this presentation yesterday, there was a photo in my ward of this happens every snowfall. So I guess I'm wondering, would this not help with, you know, during a time like the winter where people maybe they have to pay a monthly parking fee? I guess what I'm trying to get to is, why hasn't this been done in these neighborhoods?
So I'll perhaps start through you, Mr. Chair. One of the reasons with regards to residential on-street parking, you have kind of hit on it. When there becomes winter events, then the city would need to find alternative locations for those residents to be able to park in order for us to adequately clear the streets. So, not saying that it's not something that we could consider, that we would not be able to consider, but those are one of the challenges that when we do offer the on-street parking, if we need to there becomes an expectation when you sell something to an individual and they purchase that permit, then they expect that they have that spot. It is difficult to also maintain that spot for individuals and those types of things. So it is, again, I'm going to say it's a bit of a balancing act, but if it was the desire of council that and they wanted to direct staff to have a look at that staff would be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's what I'm going to do. Under Councillor Porter's down here, I would like to have a report request on the potential of on-street parking in certain areas in the city.
Okay, and we'll include that as part of item 13 on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I am going to just request, there've been a couple questions that I think are tangentially related to this report, but more fitting under 8.2. So if there are no more questions with respect to this report on one-time non-structural items and the 2021 city tax rate, then I'm going to look to the clerk to call the roll so we can pass this for information and move on to 8.2, where I think a lot of the questions are going to come from this evening.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento?
Yes.
Councillor Townsend?
Yes.
Chair Cisco?
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, we are moving on to item 8.2. This is the draft 2021 city departmental expenditure and non-tax revenue budget parking meter reserve update. This has been deferred from the 21st and the 26th. So in a moment, I will go to the director for some opening comments before we get into it. But before we do that, I just wanted to remind councilors, if you can bring forward any additions or removals from the budget and information requests during this meeting, or email them to staff by the end of the week. We do have this meeting. We have a meeting next Wednesday, which I promise I will be on time for, and then another meeting the week after. But we do want to try and have the operating budget wrapped up by the 23rd. For us to be able to do that, we need those potential additions and removals in as timely a manner as possible, and we're asking by the end of this week. With that, I will look to Ms. Douglas for some opening comments.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. So this is the preliminary draft city departmental expenditure and non-tax revenue report that initially was presented to council on October the 21st. It is focused on city departmental expenditures only and our non-tax revenues. So should there be any questions with regards to any of the city departments or these non-tax revenues, then the city departmental directors are here to address any questions that council may have with regards to the departmental budgets and these revenue items.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Douglas. With that, I'm going to look to Councillor Littleton to move the recommendation in the report. Vice Chair Littleton.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. And can I have a councillor to second the motion? Councillor Porter. All right. So the motion that is up on the screen as of right now is that the report FMS 143-2020 regarding the draft 2021 city departmental expenditure and non-tax revenue budget, as well as the parking meter reserve update, be received for information purposes forthwith. At this point, we will open the floor to any questions or possible revisions to the budget that councillors may have this evening. I will say I will be asking to make an amendment to this that we take the one-time and non-structural costs and we use the tax rate stabilization fund, what is remaining in the tax rate stabilization reserve, sorry, the remainder of the hydro reserve fund and the civic project fund to fund those one-time expenses as outlined in 8.1. And I think it's best that any of those amendments that are made, as we have done in the past, we either, we leave them until the end and we deal with them all at the end as opposed to trying to do them piecemeal throughout the evening. But this is also an opportunity for questions. So I will look to council. I have Councillor Kushner is the first one up. But I'm going to defer actually to Councillor Littleton as it is her motion. She can open first. So Councillor Littleton, if you'd like to speak to the motion. Councillor Littleton, if you'd like to speak to the motion, as it is your motion.
Oh, I have questions, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get it on the floor.
Okay, go
So
for it.
Councillor Kushner can go first for sure.
Okay. Councillor
Thanks.
Kushner, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll pass, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right then. Councillor Littleton, you're not off the hook.
Okay, thank you. I had a question about security at Sunset Beach.
And don't worry about my office tonight.
I believe this is about page 37. It says that we're going to spend, or it's proposed, $120,000 on security at the beach. So I'm just wondering, have we looked at all of the security that we now are paying for, beach, library, city hall? I'm just wondering, are there any cost savings there? Where do we get this from? And 120,000, how many months is that going to be? It seems like an extraordinary amount at the beach. Thank you.
To you, Mr. Chair, maybe I can start and I'll just to speak on what we're doing overall with regards to security and speak a bit about the beach. Staff are, as we speak, working on a security services RFP and doing this in consultation with all departments to look at all aspects of security services that we provide. We had talked about this last year in the budget process, and COVID got in the way a little bit. But we are in fact looking at doing that, and the discussions are being had at this point in time with an RFP expected to get out actually near the end of this month to look at consolidating all security services. With respect to the beaches, that number is really an estimation of some of the costs that we did in fact see this year in 2020. They were in fact in 2020 significantly higher because we had to do a lot of specific work which required a lot more security forces both at Lakeside and Sunset, and as well Morningstar Mill. As we had talked about and alluded to, the task force, which is still yet to meet, we're looking at all aspects of the lakeside and sunset beaches, and talking about solutions that will have, a multitude of effects. One being the reduction of the need for that much security, but also how do we augment sort of access points within Sunset Beach in particular, and how do we do it in such a way that we don't require as much security. That would then be tied into potentially parking revenues, charging for parking, and other elements that we're working on. That's to be determined at this point, but we're working through that. I'll sort of pass it on to any other staff that want to add some addition to that if needed.
Are there any other staff that would like to add to that, or I'm not seeing any?
Okay. So as a follow-up then, let me paint the beautiful picture where COVID has left us for the most part in our community, and we're down to I don't know what it would be in the new color-coded guideline, but stage 4. Let's say we're in stage 4. Would this be something that we would not be looking at? Or do we still actually think that we need to have some security at the beach based on just perhaps the popularity of the beach?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So one of the things that we are looking at through the Beach Task Force is issues that were magnified by COVID, but it existed pre-COVID. So we will be looking at, through the task force, what ongoing measures we need to put in place to properly manage the beach, the impact on the neighborhoods, both positive and negative, and put some things in place that we can do to control that.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. It's about the golf course. So I think to you, Director Smith, as well. Do we have any projections yet on how well the golf course did this year? I mean, anecdotally, I've heard it was packed. There was lots of people. It was really well used. Do we have any metrics yet?
We do have some numbers with respect to the revenues that we did experience. The revenues through the summer were well above what we were experiencing the last couple of years, probably last 5 years. I don't have the exact number, but I can get that for committee. It was sort of the perfect storm with respect to generating revenue at the golf course. There was not that many options available to people. Golf was one of the few that was available. We had a lot of people that had time on their hands to go and golf that were not able to work. And we had an exceptionally dry summer, which all contributed to the revenues being higher. In this budget for 2021, we have aligned our revenues more with the historic revenues that we've received on the golf course. We don't want to be overly conservative in our revenues, but we also don't want to think that the impact that we've had from COVID is going to keep that revenue stream as high as it has been in 2020.
Okay, and I know just further, we were talking about looking at third-party management of the golf course. Was there anything further on that this year, or did that kind of get just pushed to the side for this year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did facilitate an RFP process for the golf course to seek out a third party to operate it as a golf course. Unfortunately, we were not able to find any suitable operators at this time. We will be reporting back to council on that, though.
Thank you so much. My next question, Mr. Chair, is about the paint and the other improvements to the Meriton Pool that we discussed earlier this year. I just wanted to make sure that those would all be done so the pool is ready to open very first day of 2021.
Through you, Budget Chair, the work at Meriton Pool is slated to be done in the spring of 2021. We can't do that work at this time due to the cold. I know right now is not what we normally experience, but normally we need to maintain certain temperatures in order to carry out that work. But we are targeting to do that work as soon as the weather breaks in the new year.
That's excellent news. And my final question, Mr. Chair, I believe it's on page 307. This is probably to the Director of Financial Management Services. The reserves that are listed, the numbers that are there, are those the actual as most up-to-date numbers that we have?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, could you just point me to the reserve balances you're looking for in the Appendix 2?
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me scroll through this. I had
Oh,
written down.
in the budget book at the back?
Yeah, I
Oh,
have page 307 that I saw this.
yes. Through you, Mr. Chair, my apologies. Yes, those are the balances as of the end of 2019. So obviously there has been some activity that has occurred during 2020 with regards to those reserve balances. If there are reserves in particular that you are inquiring about, I can provide update. I could speak to perhaps the three reserves that have been indicated by Chair Cisco in his motion. With regards to the tax rate stabilization reserve, there is currently an uncommitted balance in that reserve of $157,000. With regards to the hydro reserve, there is an uncommitted balance of $207,000. And with regards to the civic project fund, there is forecasted to be an uncommitted balance at the end of 2021 of approximately $4.2 million.
So those numbers would be if this budget is approved, or that's currently what we have?
Through you, Mr. Chair, those would be the current balances that are available as of today, prior to any amount being used in the 2020 budget for one-time and non-structural items.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a number of questions. I'm very concerned about the budget proposals vis-a-vis guidance, and I want to start by saying that I know the mayor made some very good points to emphasize in the last discussion all of the hits that we have had as a city and things that are holding us back. But I think we also have to realize that our residents are having similar hits, many of them, and they're going to look at what they're going to have to pay, and most of them are not, they don't want to lose services, but they're also not going to care whether we're having hits or not. So we have to be so careful. So I wanted to ask specifically about, we already talked about the overall guidance being exceeded and the reasons why, but I have some questions by department. And I had sent these questions to staff back on October 22nd, but obviously they haven't had a chance to get back to me. And I just wanted to ask specifically about the departments where the increases really stand out as being above guidance. And if I can get some comments, I just want to look at the big picture. If I can get some comments from the directors in charge of what the main reason is. And I'm concerned because a number of these departments have exceeded guidance significantly, yet others were able to stay within guidance. So I don't understand why some can and some cannot. So mayor and council is one, but I want to come back to that one. So I'll start with the CAO department, which has an increase significantly above guidance. If I could have some comments on that, please.
I'm going to let the CAO comment on that, but just for a moment, I do want to jump in. And I think it's important, especially for folks who are at home listening. Councillor, you've raised a good question. But I think it bears some explanation from the budget standpoint. On an annual basis, when we ask staff and we offer them guidance, and that's what council is doing. It's important to note that guidance is exactly that. It's guidance. It's not a direction that thou shalt come in at a certain taxation rate. It's the guidance that's offered. When staff takes that number, they look at the budget holistically. And I know Ms. Douglas has mentioned this, but I want to reiterate it because I think it's important. From one year to the next, one department may be able to hold to guidance, may be able to come in significantly below whatever our guidance level is, where other departments will come in higher. And that can change from year to year depending on the situation. Obviously, this year is a little bit different, but using previous years as an example, we've always seen, at least in my time as the chair, we've always seen our IT department come in above guidance. I think that's happened every year that IT has come in above guidance. The reason for that is pretty clear, though. We've made a lot of steps to try and improve the situation with our information technology at City Hall. So when staff put together their budget, it's done from a team perspective, and the team of senior management sits down and identifies what areas need to be greater priorities in the coming year, what areas are able to not take that leading role in terms of priorities. And so the budget is done that way. So I wanted to make that overall comment with respect to the budget, because I think it's important for people that are watching at home, for the media when they're reporting and speaking about our budget process. It's important to note that although council has provided a guidance number, the budget, each of those different departments can't be looked at in isolation. I don't think that's fair to the work that's done in those departments, but also the work that's done by the senior management team to make the city as a whole operate efficiently. With that, I'll turn it over to CAO Shelley Chemnitz, and she can speak to the CAO's office.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Chair, and I fully understand the meaning of guidance. And basically what I would like to hear is, just like you explained about IT, I'm sure some of these departments, if not all, have some specific reasons why, but I think it's important to know why, because as you said, this year is different and it's very special in some ways.
Oh, Councillor, understand, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and that's why I'm happy to turn it over to Ms. Chemnitz and the other department heads. I just wanted to make sure that if anybody's at home watching, that they understand that explanation as well. But I will turn it over to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And certainly, as we progress through the directors, there are some instances where I think we will defer to Ms. Douglas, as there are certain things that impact all of us the same. For instance, in the CAO's budget, you'll see that many of the if we focus on the larger increases, it's often in that benefit grouping. So as we go through the various parts of the CAO's office, actually the CAO, the print center and communications, some of those increases are in benefits. And if you look through the corporation as a whole, you will see that weaving itself through departments. So that's impacting the CAO's budget, certainly. In the CAO's set of accounts solely, there's one line item there that says salaries, wages, extra services. That is, as you will recall, the flexible staffing model that council provided us some funds for this for the first time in 2020. But what we did in our 2020 budget is that using the 2020 budget numbers, as we use those flexible staffing dollars throughout the organization, there has been some allocation of that budget back. So you see it an increase. If you'll recall, to the approvals of last year, it was in the $77,000 amount, but 2020 budget is somewhat lower because we've used it up in other departments. So that has actually just been distributed. The other indications of increases within this group of accounts are principally in the areas of salaries and wages. So we've had a number of instances where employees are moving up throughout the steps in their jobs, and various implications of the collective bargaining agreement and the wage rates that we have. So principally, there's nothing that is standing out as a new initiative or things that are different, but it is in those salary and benefits lines. I don't know if the Director of Financial Management Services would want to touch on benefits initially, because that will also impact many of the other departments, and that maybe I'll pass it over to her at this time.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, with regards to the city's employee benefits costs, we are experiencing some increases in our statutory benefits, those being our CPP as well as our WSIB and EI rates for the city. Also, the other benefits, which are the extended health benefits, those items are also increasing, partly due to some changes in the last round of negotiations with our bargaining units, but also just due to some increase is with experience, because we do pay for our extended health benefits based on usage.
Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you to the CAO. Appreciate the explanation. My next department I would ask was legal and clerk services that had a fairly large increase, almost 6%.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can perhaps jump in for the Director of Legal and Clerk Services. The main reason for the increase in the Legal and Clerk Services budget, as the councillor may recall, there was a report at the October 21st committee meeting with regards to a records information analyst position that was added due to the result of some work that was done on the city's information management, and perhaps the deputy clerk may be able to provide you with some more details as with regards to the particular work that staff member would be providing the corporation.
Through the chair, when we went through a records and information management strategy this past year and a half, the biggest takeaway from that is that we are severely under-resourced and getting further and further behind in our records management. And their number one recommendation was you need to have someone who can dedicate their time solely to records management. So that was the first item we've brought forward to council. And based on the feedback and direction at the budget standing committee meeting, we did have it added to the draft budget, and then it was further brought forward to council. I think that was the October 5th meeting, perhaps.
Thank you for that. Similar question to municipal works through you, Mr. Chair. They're not particularly high, but I would appreciate comments from Mr. Smith if possible.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the budget of municipal works, because most of our budget is staff related, with the high volume number of staff that we have, is due to increases in wages and benefits. We do have some other minor increases, for instance, in equipment maintenance. Relatively speaking, there's an increase there, but that is a direct result of having our fleet age and trying to get as many years as possible out of our fleet.
Thank you for that, Mr. Smith. And a similar question to CRCS, which is quite a bit higher, I guess, on a percentage basis, but I would appreciate some comments from the director.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The variances that you see before you, Councillor, related to CRCS, I think I can best summarize in 3 points. First is that we're forecasting lower than normal capacities, registration, attendance, and therefore revenue at our programs. So that would include aquatics, community centers, and our older adult centers. While those numbers unfortunately look to be trending downwards, we do need to maintain a certain level of staffing in order for us to maintain levels of service that we currently have, find new ways to remain connected and to serve people in new and innovative ways, some of which may cost additional dollars. Also, in the case of our older adult centers, we have typically received funding from other levels of government for our programs, but we're not really sure as to what we're going to be able to get from the province to help support our older adult centers at this time. So our revenues are showing much lower, and unfortunately across the board. and thus you see the variances that you see before you.
Thank you, Mr. Christie. So you're saying that that increase could come down if and when you get this funding from the province, or?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, not only that, Councillor, if, you know, as Councillor Littleton alluded to earlier, or maybe it was wishful thinking that maybe we could go to a stage 4. If restrictions are lifted and if we get capacity limits lifted at our facilities and life resumes as close to normal as we can possibly get, then our hope is that participation, registration, and attendance increase again, and then hopefully revenues will come up again. So it's a combination of those two things.
Thank you very much, Director. And similar question to corporate support services. I don't know if Ms. Pelletier is here. Or...
Through you, Budget Chair. Similar to what was touched on earlier on with regards to increases for staffing, you would see that across from HR, Citizens First, and IT. So we have individuals who have movement on progression of their scales. It was touched on earlier on with regards to union increases, benefits, and so forth. That is applied through all of the 3 areas under my portfolio. As touched on by the Budget Chair himself, he spoke about our IT infrastructure. And I think what I wanted to bring forward this evening was that I think we're well aware that we do have a lot of aging IT infrastructure. So when we do bring on new solutions, it comes at a cost. And some of our current systems, they're supported by the IT staff. So there's no additional costs that we normally see. But when we bring on something new, there's no offsetting of costs. So we get a new product and there's the associated costs to it. There's not, you know, we have product A, we used to pay X amount of dollars for, now we're getting product B. There's not that offsetting because we are supporting it ourselves through our IT staff. So those increases that you see in the IT area is for improved software applications.
Thank you, Ms. Pelletier. And I know that Council has viewed in the past the need for some new and improved software in different areas. Considering the current situation, are there any areas there where we could defer or delay something for some time?
The costs that normally come forward, or through you, Budget Chair, the costs that normally come forward into our operations, our operating budgets are decisions that we have already made. So these are service contracts and so forth. So if it is something that is new, that usually goes through capital process, which we do have, you know, projects on tap through the capital process. So there isn't anything that I could say to you that we could take away for this year. Where there could be opportunities or for council to review is through the capital process. I would like to share that there isn't a lot in that capital budget. I think that staff have done a great job in trying to prioritize what we have to do. And I'll just move advance. I don't think there's a lot there that we can take away if you do take a look at that capital detail.
Thank you, Ms. Pelletier, for that. And Mr. Chair, through you, last but not least, Mayor and Council, and I don't know who could comment on that, maybe maybe Ms. Douglas, but I found it interesting that particularly with Council, there is a line showing an increase called pensions, and unless I'm missing something, I don't think we get a pension, and I don't know whether that is CPP that's included in there to the extent that we get deducted some of that, or?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the mayor and council, the councillor is correct. The pension line is with reference to the statutory CPP deduction, and also includes the mayor's wages do include OMERS contributions. We are required as an OMERS employee that all full-time employees are required to be members of the OMERS pension plan. The other item with regards to the office of the mayor and council is there is the inclusion of $25,000 this year for the city to host the Great Lakes St. Lawrence event for 2021.
And I will just jump in and point out that that may be an opportunity for our tourism sector next year. and would be a very positive opportunity. I will also point out, though, that it is one of those one-time expenditures and would potentially fall under the amendment that's there.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. Chair and Ms. Douglas. And yes, I read that in the reports that could be an opportunity to bring tourism and generate revenue. Hopefully, this situation is under control enough. What time of the year would that happen?
I will look to the
that would be at the end of May.
The end of May. So hopefully there is a chance. Every indication that we see is that the current wave is probably peaking in the next couple of months, we hope. I know I was reading articles down south where they say the time of the new presidential inauguration is going to be right at the peak, roughly around the end of January. And we're hoping that here, although we don't have the same situation, it starts to come down. I'd like to thank every department head for that information and repeat that I'm, of course, very concerned about trying to keep our tax increases down because everybody out there is suffering. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. And if I could just ask everybody, say a prayer for the scientists in the world who are currently working on a vaccine. Good news this week, but there's lots of other vaccines in the works, and hopefully the world has something to smile about as we head into the Christmas season. With that, I'll look to Councillor Kushner, followed by Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I have is from page 52, and it concerns supplemental revenues. And the report says they're down by 25% because of unfavorable building permit activity. And yet when you travel throughout the city, the building activity seems to be very buoyant. Can you explain why we're down by 25%?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the building activity, as you may recall earlier this year, because of COVID, there was some temporary restrictions placed on building permit activity, and only those buildings projects that were deemed essential were able to continue. So there did create a bit of a slowdown in the building community. Also, there, in general, there is some struggle within the building community with regards to getting the skilled trades and those types of things. So yes, there is the building activity, but it does take some time for the building permits to and the building to return after it has been paused, and the additional restrictions with regards to COVID do provide some additional delays.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Kushner. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, through you, the chair. I just a couple questions, and I apologize. I don't have the report right in front of me. I did have to move locations due to some connection issues. But just with regards to staffing levels, obviously we had a lot of layoffs due to COVID or spurred by COVID. Are we projecting to be back at a full complement of staff, or at least at our 2019 or start of 2020 level of staff in 2021? Is that the plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, with regards to our staffing, yes, the 2021 budget is built on the fact that we would be, fully staffed. That is to put the city in the best position for us to be able to continue to provide the services that our residents do expect. Although should there be situations that would arise that we need to, pivot and remain flexible, then the senior leadership team would make those assessments and make those judgments with regards to the staffing positions at that time.
Okay, thank you. Just a question about a couple specific staffing positions. The first one is the equity officer we've talked about at some length, and I know our advisory committees are really pushing for us to hire. Is that position included in next year's budget?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with regard to that particular position, that position hasn't been included within the 2021 operating budget. I do believe there is an outstanding item with regards to that position, but I'm just, I'd need to refer back on that. We could perhaps bring you an update.
Yeah, okay, that would be great, because I think that's sort of been approved by council, I think, a couple times, so I'd certainly like to see it included, or at least learn what the number I'd have to include it. The other question is,
can I ask that you ask for that as just a direction to staff?
Sure.
We add it to the screen so that it's captured now.
Yeah, sure. So direction to staff to provide an update on the equity officer position.
Thank you.
Then the other question is, I believe the golf course didn't have a head greenskeeper last season. I think this season that position was sort of split between maybe the cemetery, I believe it was, and the golf course. Are we looking at having a head greenskeeper for the Garden City Golf Course at some point?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that position is included in the 2021 operating budget.
Okay, that's great. I know the golf course is popular whipping boy for some, but it really was a good season out there, and certainly wanted to give it all the support we can. So thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments with respect to this report? As a reminder, if councillors do have additional questions, there will be opportunities at the next meeting. But any amendments, and as I said, you do still have time. They do not need to come in this evening, but any other amendments we're hoping can be placed on the floor at the next meeting and are in with staff by Friday. With that, we have Councillor Porter, followed by Mayor Sendzik.
Thank you, Chair Sendzik. Through you to Director Smith, you sent me some information related to the forestry budget, which I really appreciated in the form of a memo. And I know that COVID-19, as you mentioned, had a big impact on the forestry budget. And there was a removal of a seasonal arborist position this year. Is that position coming back? And the information I received about the forestry department was that it was going to take a few years for us to get back to where we were because of the impact of COVID this year. And I just want to hear from you. Do we have enough resources in the forestry department? We have a lot more trees going down because of climate change. And I'm just worried about the risks and managing residents' expectations when they call about a concerned tree.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So since I sent that forestry memo, my management team here at Lake Street, we've been working on a way to provide some additional resources to forestry within our current complement. And we have put a plan in place that will do that. It will do it on a sort of a blitz approach. We're going to take times of years when we have some slow time in other areas to take those resources and to assist the forestry staff and do some blitzing. We, at this point, don't have can't provide an estimate as to what that will do with respect to catching up in the backlog, but it was a way of trying to provide some additional resources without requiring additional budget and or contracted services.
Okay. So are you confident in this, that this plan is going to meet the residents' expectations and mitigate the risks? Or I still have some concerns. I just want to make sure that we're not under-resourcing that department.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I am confident that we will mitigate and deal with the risk trees. So as I mentioned in the memo, it's the trees that are rated 0, 1, and 2. Those are really the at-risk trees. So this plan will definitely deal with the at-risk tree to manage risk to the city. It will also help us catch up on the 3 and 4 trees, those that are rated 3 or 4, which require pruning but are not a danger. And that will, so will we catch all up in 6 months? No, but it will be definitely quicker than the 2 years we were forecasting in the memo.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. I don't have any motions related to this. I'm just wondering, will you come back in 6 months? I mean, if something changes and we get a terrible like winter season and things get behind, I really think that we need to be a little more agile with this tree budget because the weather is so unpredictable. And perhaps we might have to rethink or reallocate resources or take money out of a reserve. I think maybe just the direction is that we have a discussion at council, maybe on a quarterly basis about the tree budget and making sure that we're keeping on top of it. It's just, to me, it's something the weather has been unpredictable and COVID's made things really difficult. And sometimes I imagine you probably need additional resources all of a sudden in some of your budgets. And I want to make sure that council is supporting that. So thank you very much. And thank you for all of the work that you do through all of the seasons.
All right, thank you, Councillor Porter. Mayor Sendzik.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll try and be relatively quick. The first one is if I could just have a motion, and I appreciate Councillor Garcia talking about by department, just gives a good lens into the different departments. A motion for this council to support the funding for the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, the 25,000, and I ask for that tonight because we've got to confirm with the accommodation partners as well as the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative to ensure that if this is moving forward, so we're in November, we've got to start to secure rooms for the potential May conference. I will say that there are out clauses, so we are guaranteed not to lose the 25,000. It's just we got to have this base funding in order for us to continue to work on the events. I need council's approval if possible tonight for that. As well, for the next meeting, Mr. Chair, I would like the council to consider the reallocation or reduction in the parking reserve budget and have that reduced to 500,000 instead of 1 million. I think Director Douglas made a clear case that the number that was included at 1 million was a high estimate. And I think as we come out of COVID in 2022, there'll be an opportunity to top up that reserve again. And it also, I think, through the chair to council, gives staff some insight as to we do have some parking assets that we need to look at and maybe better utilize rather than just continuously putting a considerable amount of money into the structures. Is there different ways, as you've heard from council tonight, is there different ways to look at these investments that we're making? Those are two areas that I'd like council to look at. The reduction in parking reserve that can be discussed at the next meeting, Chair. But the other one would be appreciated tonight. This one is a question out of the operating budget for Garden City Arena operations. And I'm just looking for clarity. In 2019, the net expenditures was about 800,000, and the forecast for 2021 is 1.2 million. So there's a $400,000 variance there. And I'm just wondering, is that variance all COVID related? It seems like quite a jump over 2019. And considering that council will be moving forward with a discussion in 2021 about the use of that arena, since we'll have been opening up the Canada Games Park over in partnership with Brock University, the region, and Thorold, What is the $400,000 variance driven by?
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair. Some of that variance is related to reduced revenue as a result of COVID. We rely on revenue for that arena to offset operational costs in the facility. Moving forward, I believe that the intent is to close the facility so that we can accommodate that type of programming in the Canada Summer Games facility.
And I appreciate, through the chair, when I look at the revenues, the comparable revenues from 2021 and 2020, there's a $70,000 variance in revenues projected. So I'm just so that leaves an additional, 330 on the table still, and I'm just wondering is what is the allocation for that? Is that, it doesn't look like it's staffing, because it looks like staffing has remained static. I'm just trying to get an understanding. Is it repairs to the building? Apologize for putting you on the spot. It was just one of those larger ones as I'm going through it that it popped out.
Through you, Mr. Budget Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a closer look at that in order to provide an accurate response.
So through chair, through the chair, if that could just be added to a discussion at the next meeting. And I guess my summary comments, Mr. Chair, if I can, is I agree with Councillor Garcia on the ability for people to pay. And I think when people look at the number tonight, as we've been reviewing this, I don't think it should give any councillor comfort in that number. And so, whatever ways and means we find a way to whittle that down, it shouldn't affect services. We got to make sure we maintain services, but also allow us to keep some opportunities on the table so that we can continue to open up our community in different ways. But it's important that we ask these questions so that we get better clarity around where are the significant shifts taking place when it comes to expenses and revenues. So I appreciate the time, Mr. Chair.
Right, thank you, Mayor Sendzik, and I look now to Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, with your amendment, can I speak to that now or ask questions about that stuff?
You can speak to it now, Councillor. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So from what the director said before, that's roughly about $4.5 million. Is that correct? That you're asking that we take into consideration for using?
No, that would be, I think, be the total amount that would be available.
Okay.
But to be able to make the changes would cost, I believe it was listed at 2.9 million, give or take. And that would be to go from the tax rate stabilization reserve first, then the hydro reserve, and then the balance, which I would say is about 2.4 or 2.5 million, and staff will have to correct me on that, from the Civic Project Fund.
Okay, so if we use all of those reserves, are they depleted and we don't put money back into that, or is that something that?
Well, we have policy with respect to the tax rate stabilization reserve,
Okay.
With respect to year-end balances. So at the end of year next year, there's a possibility that some monies may go back into the tax rate stabilization reserve. The hydro reserve fund, that's really dependent on hydro, and we may have news about that in the new year, but as of right now, we don't have anything. With the Civic Project Fund, we are putting dollars into that on a year-by-year basis, paying back the loan that was given, that was issued from the Civic Project Fund for Seymour Hanna. So there is revenue going into that on a year-on-year basis as well. And staff can again correct me if I'm wrong on this. Our policy when it comes to sale of property is that any funds taken in from sale of property would also go to the Civic Project Fund. So there is a way to there are processes that will put money back into that reserve as time goes on. And again, when it comes to outstanding dividends or other funds that come into the city, council can always choose to direct those towards the Civic Project Fund or one of the other reserves, which I think is a prudent choice, especially now. If we're going to make the decision to use these funds now, then I think we all have to be cognizant that if unexpected funding does come to the city and there's an opportunity to refill those reserves, we have to take that step as well. That's the second part of this. It's not simply a matter of just draining the reserves. We also have to be cognizant that we need to try and build them back up.
Okay. And could we ask staff to give us maybe some examples of other places that we could use some of the reserves from for some of the debt that we might incur, other than the ones that you've put out there tonight, and the mayor also put out the parking reserve? Is there other ones that staff could maybe look into and give us for options?
I think we can, you're looking at specifically reserve funds and options related to other reserve funding.
Yeah.
I think we could ask for a report to come back. I think that would be a good plan. I know we have some information in the operating budget with respect to our reserves and our reserve funds, but I think we can ask for additional information about those other reserves for the next meeting. I'm looking to Ms. Douglas. Is that something that could be put together for the next meeting, or would that be Monday the 23rd?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I can perhaps speak to it briefly at this point, and we can bring back information to the committee. The three reserves that are being spoken about at this time are the reserves that provide flexibility for the city. The majority of the city's other reserves are largely for either discretionary purposes, meaning that they are required, or non-discretionary, I mean, they are required for us to put these monies in reserves, and a lot of them are for capital purposes, and also due to being funds from other levels of government, such as the federal gas tax and the provincial gas tax. There are also reserve funds such as the winter control reserve. So that reserve fund is specifically set aside should we run into a difficult winter and there not be enough resources with our dollars within the operating budget to cover our winter control needs. Then that reserve would be the reserve that we would want to tap into. There are also other capital reserves, for the First Ontario Performing Arts Centre and the Meridian Centre, and those reserves are specifically reserved for allocation purposes. But we can bring something back to council, but there are not a lot of reserves that could potentially be utilized, for assisting with the pressure on the 2021 budget.
Thank you for that information. But Mr. Chair, if we could ask for that, if we need to put it in as an amendment, I would like to have that in there, please.
Okay, so and that staff report back with additional information about the other reserve and reserve funds. Does that work, Councillor?
That's perfect. Yes, thank you.
Excellent. All right. Are there any other questions or comments with respect to what we have on the screen? All right. So I'll look to Councillor Littleton as this is her motion. Councillor Littleton, do you want to vote on this separately, or would you like to move everything as friendly that's on the screen? Councillor Littleton, I'm not sure why, but I'm not getting any audio from you.
Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay, sorry. Just because we're not approving the entire budget tonight or anything like that, I'm happy to, these are all friendly because this is a good discussion that we're having and we're trying to get some answers so that we can make better decisions in the future.
Okay. And if I can look to staff, the expectation on council's part is that there will be a report with an updated budget document coming to us for Wednesday's meeting with the changes that have been outlined.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's the anticipation of staff as to how we would walk through this. Certainly anything that we're moving tonight is to be brought back for the full consideration, particularly because as we're sitting in general committee, we don't want to be in a position of tying our hands. We want to look at the budget as the whole, with the exception of Mayor Senzik's motion regarding Great Lakes mayors, because he does need we need to make a decision on that this evening.
Budget pre-approval. Well, then, can I make a suggestion? And I'm going to look to Mayor Sendzik. The St. Lawrence Great Lakes event for $25,000 is on the list of one-time expenditures.
It is.
Can we identify then that the tax rate stabilization reserve will be the location where those funds come from?
It's fine. It's up to council. Like if that's what you want to add there, that would be fine by me.
Okay. Given it's one, I mean, in the past, we have used the tax rate stabilization reserve specifically for items exactly like this, one-time events that have no recurring expectation. Okay, so if this is all friendly then, and there are no more questions or comments or concerns, and I'm seeing nobody raising their little blue hands, then I will look to the clerk to call the roll on the motion in its entirety.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
and Chair Cisco.
Yes.
That's carried.
All right, excellent, excellent, and a very thorough discussion. I appreciate.
Actually, I never called Councillor Porter's name.
Oh, Councillor
That's right.
Porter.
Yes.
That's carried.
Wonderful. It's unanimous. Moving on to item 8.3, the Meridian Center 2021 budget operating expenses. This was referred back to the Meridian Center staff at our last general committee meeting for a better review of the operating lines to give better insight to the request. So at this point, I'm going to ask if anybody can move the recommendation in the report. Councillor Miller and Councillor Phillips. All right, so we have the motion on the floor that the memo from the GM of the Meridian Center dated November 5th, attached as Appendix 1 be received, and that the budget presented by the Meridian Center on the 26th be included in the draft operating budget for consideration forthwith. I see a question from Councillor Kushner. Councillor Kushner.
No, I had my hand up to vote. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Any questions or comments with respect to the memo? Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it can actually be answered because I'm just wondering about, in the report, it's talking about 16 full-time employees. Are they actually working there now? Because they were talking about some of that government wage subsidy, but I'm just wondering, how has that been going? And that's in the weeds a little bit. I don't want to be too, asking too many questions that may not be any of our, our purview, but I just was wondering, if there's no entertainment, if there's no ice dogs, if there's nothing going on, how many employees are actually there?
Right, I will look to Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, we actually right now have approximately 15 staff working. We are running the venue with ice rentals, so as a municipal ice rental facility, and we are being very successful with that currently. So being able to offer that to the community, I would say we're running around 95% occupancy for our prime time. The good news is for the city is that we are receiving wage subsidy. The wage subsidy is covering a good portion. I would say it is covering, off the top of my head, approximately 5 to 6 positions. We do not have the full complement of 16. We do have people who we have not backfilled a few jobs when people have moved on to full-time roles. So at this point in time, we have 14 full-time staff. We are receiving wage subsidy from the government on all of those staff, and 6 of those staff are receiving full wages being covered by that subsidy.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Of course, you're renting it for ice rental. Of course you are. I apologize for that. And excellent. I really appreciate all that information. Thank you.
And if I can just throw in a kudos to Mr. Dixon and the staff over at the Meridian Center. A number of my students were talking today about the best places to play hockey in Niagara, and they're Niagara Falls students, and they pointed out the Meridian Center and said it was their favorite place to play. So kudos to you for the environment you're creating over at the Meridian Center. Any other questions or comments with respect to item 8.3? All right, seeing none, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
I do see a hand up from the mayor.
Oh, Mayor Sendzik.
And thanks. I apologize, Chair, for putting up my hand late. I do want to say thank you to Mr. Dixon for putting this together. And again, as Councillor Garcia had mentioned previously, in terms of the impact on the taxpayer, I think it's important, again, that we show what the impact COVID-19 is having on our major facilities that we, and when I use the we, I'm not talking about this council, but previous councils, the collective we as a community have invested significant dollars into, and we have to keep the operating facility moving. And I think what this shows is that we need events back in the Meridian Center in order to generate the kind of return on investment that previous councils had foreshadowed for our community. And so again, I hope this is a point in which the media can pick this up and talk about the impact of COVID-19 on our community isn't just what people like to point to in terms of city operations. It is a marquee facility in St. Catharines and indeed Niagara, and it is suffering significantly. So good job by Mr. Dixon to showcase that, and let's hope that we can have activities in the Meridian Center by at least, hopefully at the latest, spring of 2021, if all things line up.
Agreed wholeheartedly. If there are no other questions, then I will look to the clerk.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik,
Yes.
and Chair Cisco.
Yes.
And that's carried.
All right, moving on to item 8.5, the Office of the Mayor Administration and the 2021 Operating Budget Telephone Town Hall Public Engagement Results. I will first ask Councillor Garcia if you can put the motion on the floor.
Yes, I will move that, Mr. Chair, and then I will speak to him.
Okay, so that the report be received for information and that henceforth the wording of all questions to be posed to the public regarding budgets always be approved by the full budget standing committee. I will comment, and I understand the impetus, and Councillor Garcia, you will speak momentarily to introduce it. I did want to point out, it's important to recognize that there was actually a very different public engagement strategy that was originally intended for this year. There were a number of changes that were in the works, and then those didn't happen, obviously, because of COVID-19. So I don't know if the process will necessarily look the same next year. However, with that said, Councillor Garcia, I look forward to the debate about this, and I think any guidance for that task force on public engagement will be positive. And I think this motion should be understood to provide direction for that task force and the form of public engagement that comes later. Before we get into it, though, I did want to ask, is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Porter, okay. And so Councillor Garcia, I will look to you to introduce your amended motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be brief. First of all, I believe we all have a responsibility always to provide accurate information to our residents. And however, as I identified at last night's council meeting, I was very concerned that when I looked at the report on the questions that were asked at the town hall and the results, I noticed that the question on the CIP that was in that town hall, using the town hall, was incorrect and identified tax assessment as tax revenue. And that means the number was off by a factor of over 10 times. So I asked staff and they said that the questions in this particular case were drafted by yourself and the mayor. And I'm sure that you both meant well, but I believe that had the full budget committee been involved, this mistake would have definitely been caught because, you know, it would have been a few other pairs of eyes looking at this. So that's why I'm suggesting that I don't know if that was just a change this year, but I believe that at least the full committee should be reviewing these to make sure that they're accurate.
And your point is very well taken, Councillor. And that's one of the reasons why I think this will be instructive as direction going forward. One of the things that came out of the task force, though, on public engagement specific to the budget committee, and Councillor Porter and Councillor Littleton were on that with me, and they can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but one of the directions that came out of it was that we'd actually like to engage a polling firm or a public opinion firm, one that has a great deal of experience with respect to these types of questions, to ensure that what we're using is valid. And I think that is something that will be important going forward. But as I said, I think this will provide some direction that whatever is to be used in whatever format of public engagement does come back to the Budget Standing Committee. I think that's important as well. With that, Councillor Garcia, did you have any other comments, or can I move to Councillor Townsend? You muted yourself, but I think you're saying we can move on. Okay. And I think, Councillor Townsend, you're going to ask that the record actually be corrected. I believe you had mentioned that earlier, but you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cisco. I don't really care who came up with the questions. I didn't know who did, but I would comment that in the world of academia, we know that guided questions provide a biased outcome. I was disappointed to see that question because I believe that we have a great deal of responsibility to provide transparent information to our residents. So all I would, kindly ask is that be corrected for the just for the record. Again, doesn't matter who came up with the questions, but I do believe that we have a responsibility to just provide the right wording there. Thank you.
Councillor, if I can ask, as an amendment to Councillor Garcia's motion, which I assume would be considered friendly, that an explanatory note be left with the questions. I don't think we can change the wording of the question, but we can explain the error that was made.
Yes, I think that would make sense.
Okay, excellent. I appreciate. So if we can just add an amendment, I'm going to look to Councillor Garcia. That's friendly, Councillor Garcia.
That's definitely friendly. I think it's so important that that the public know that we recognize when a mistake was made and corrected.
Yeah, and I will, as the budget chair, I will apologize specifically for that. That was an oversight and it wasn't intended. I will be honest in that I believe that public opinion would not have changed too much, but it doesn't actually matter. It was a factually incorrect statement, and I bear responsibility for that as the budget chair. So I do apologize to all on council and to the Budget Standing Committee specifically, but the council in general for that error.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Are there any other comments or questions with respect to this? Okay. As I said, it was an unfortunate error in terminology, and it was something I should have caught, and I do apologize for that. Councillor Miller.
Just, I guess, this is sort of falls on Councillor Townsend. I appreciate the update to that we can't change the wording. I just wonder, the question, I mean, whether the number was right or not, was so biased and guiding to the point of really not being useful at all. I'm just wondering if we should be striking it rather than from the report. It really doesn't really provide useful information because it's just, again, I understand no one here is a polling expert, but it's just a question that would never ever be asked in that way. And it doesn't really have any value, especially considering the error that was made in asking it. So I guess to Councillor Townsend, I'm wondering if he'd be willing to change that to striking it rather than just updating it, because I don't even think that will be factually accurate.
Yeah, through the chair, I wanted to originally just strike it out. I just wanted it removed. Is that something we can do? Can we just remove it from the report?
I'll look to staff for the procedural.
Is this in reference to the CIP report?
No. The question for just question 4 as it's listed in the telephone.
Oh, in today's report. We can create a note on. We can't just delete it. We can cross it out and reference why it was removed. We have done that for corrections to agendas in the past, similar to how you see a note when an item's deferred. You see a red note saying this item was originally published on this date and is now being republished, or it was originally published on this date. We can reference the direction from council at that point.
Okay, yeah, so anything that we can do to strike it or remove it, I'm good with.
Okay, so Councillor Kushner.
Yes, I have a similar type of concern with question 2. And the last option says, I do not want to see any services reduced, and 43% of the people said that. Now, that question should have a cost. Perhaps I do not want to see any services reduced, even though my tax rate will go up by 4 to 5%. So there has to be some type of cost explanation with that.
Okay, so I appreciate the comment, Councillor Kushner. I see a number of hands going up. So I'm going to ask for a pause right now. As I've indicated, this is not the format going forward, and that decision had already been made. This was, however, the format that the telephone town hall took. Now, with a question like that, you have to, for those who aren't familiar with the telephone town hall, we don't have a lot of time, and this is the reason why we're moving away from this format. If you speak to Councillor Littleton or Councillor Porter, we had this discussion and it was agreed that this wasn't the best way to be gauging public opinion, but we had space to fill. And this question is very similar to questions we have asked in the future, or sorry, in the past. I don't want us to get into the specifics. I mean, I think it's important to correct the record, as Councillor Townsend, Councillor Miller, and Councillor Garcia have stated with the one question. But with respect to the others, I think it's important to recognize that going forward, this won't be how we are gauging public opinion. And so to quibble about the wording now of the questions, I think is an exercise in futility, because based on the direction that the task force and the budget committee were going, this is not going to be the future format. So I would just caution everybody before we get too into the different questions, because as I said, with the exception of question 4, the 3 other questions are all essentially repeats from previous years. Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what I was just going to reiterate, that I don't know that we should really, I can appreciate all the comments and they're completely valid. I just think at this point, we can't get rid of things. It happened. Those were the results from those questions, whether they were good questions or not. So I just don't want us to get too much in the weeds with this. I think all of the comments are excellent, and you're right, Mr. Chair. We did strike a task force so that we could come up with better ideas, and I think that that we will see this next year. So thank you for those comments.
All right, thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually think that we need to strike the budget engagement task force again. We went towards the telephone town hall because of COVID, and all of the ideas we had, we just couldn't implement. They required some budget. We were looking at doing some in-person ward meetings. What I will say about the telephone town hall is, I mean, public engagement has there's many different types. There's like informing and involving and collaborating and consulting. And people do love the telephone town hall. The feedback is great. And I think it's a good tool for informing people that it's budget time. It just, as I mentioned a couple of years ago, it happens very late in the budget process. Like the budget's already been set up. And it really, but it isn't a tool to inform. All of those questions, I take them with a grain of salt. Because I don't think they're proper polling questions. And I think this discussion is actually quite important. We do have to think before we ask specific questions. They have to be very good questions and honest questions and transparent questions. So I actually do think we need to have this discussion today. I would like to bring the task force back because budget engagement, I mean, our budget doesn't go away during COVID. And I actually think we might have to come up with some even different ideas for next year. So I'll just say that, and I do appreciate the councillors bringing this up, and I think it's important. But the comments from the telephone town hall are things that I look at, things that people are saying, and I guess I'm losing my train of thought because of the council meeting last night. So I'm going to stop talking. But thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Porter. And I will ask staff that we can make sure that the first Budget Standing Committee meeting in 2021 have the terms of reference for the task force reintroduced, and we can look at restriking the task force at that time to plan for the 2022 budget season. If there are no other comments or concerns, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Garcia,
Yes.
Councillor Kushner,
Yes.
Councillor Phillips,
Yes.
Councillor Sorrento,
Yes.
Councillor Dodge,
Yes.
Councillor Littleton,
Yes.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik,
Yes.
Councillor Porter,
Yes.
Councillor Townsend,
Yes.
Chair Cisco,
Yes.
and that's carried.
All right, and we are moving now to 8.6, which is the living wage employer follow-up. Moved, and I'm on the floor, that Councillor Miller, you're moving this motion. Do I have a seconder for this motion? Councillor Townsend. Okay, so Councillor Miller, if you'd like to speak to it.
Sure. I'm the one who brought the motion forward about becoming a certified living wage employer. I certainly read the report and appreciate the report, and I think makes some excellent points. I guess my only question is, and I know because I know there's been some interest in this from the public, is what we asked for was an implementation report. We didn't necessarily put a timeline on it, and I understand with, especially now, this was all before COVID, but especially now with COVID, that might not be possible to do it in 2021 or 2022 or 2025. But is this report saying, because I wasn't really clear, that City of St. Catharines, it's unrealistic to ever become a certified living wage employer? Because to me, if it's not saying that, then the implementation report would still be valid and say, we're on a 10-year track to become a living wage employer, or a 5-year track, or a 3-year track. So I'm just curious if that's the feeling, is that it's just not possible for our municipality because of our wage structure as is, and the compensation, the comprehensive compensation strategy, which sounds great, certainly support that. So that's, I guess, my question. Are we never going to become living wage, or is it still an option in the future?
Through you, Budget Chair. I think if we can differentiate what you mentioned, Councillor, was we can become a living wage employer, but we are not recommending the certification of being a living wage employer. Our report outlines concerns with being a certified living wage employer, but again, we can move towards the living wage and support the initiatives behind it. But as outlined, I don't know if you need me to touch on these points, but there were challenges, things that we felt as staff that we would lose as a control piece with regards to compensation. So how I would be addressing this is that we are going to move through this strategy, a plan to become a living wage employer, but not a certified living wage employer.
Okay, and I appreciate that part, and I certainly, again, the points made in the report were certainly valid. Again, I guess I'm just curious. So, what the issues identified, the existing issues identified in the report, and why we need a comprehensive compensation strategy. Once those are addressed, is the feeling that it's still not possible. It's still not, I guess, it still wouldn't be recommended to become certified, which again, in the value of that to me is showing leadership as one of the largest employers and vendor and sort of contractors of vendors in the city and in the region. So is that the feeling that it will never be recommended to become certified?
Through you, Budget Chair, as you mentioned, this timeline could be, a few years down the road. I would ask, and I would look at this upon myself, I would look at what the next years look like with regards to the living wage and how that's moved, because we did see a striking difference with regards to the formula that they used. And they changed the formula from a 37-hour work week to a 35-hour work week, and that jump was huge. And anytime the recommendation comes forward to move your living wage, you have 6 months to do that. So this is the aspect of that control piece, but I don't want to say that we will never be certified, but I would say that my recommendation is that we would watch over the next several years what that tracking looks like and to see if there are reasonable increases and so forth. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. And again, I appreciate that. And, it makes me a little bit sad that we won't be doing this term of council, but certainly support the staff recommendation. I just hope whatever iteration of future councils is that someone picks up this ball and at least we look at it again, because like I said, I think it is important to show leadership as much as it is to be a living wage employer. It is to show leadership in the community. So thank you. And thanks for answering these questions again. Normally I would ask these in an email or a phone call, but I think it's just important for future reference to have these on the public record as well. So thank you.
Not a problem.
All right, Mayor Stenzik.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Miller, for bringing this on the floor. I guess as Chair of Niagara Regional Housing, I'm probably the only one around the table right now that has the experience of actually going through the certification. So we're at the leader level, and I'm proud to say that we were one of the first larger corporations to be certified as a living wage employer. And I guess the first question is, because I'll be honest, I don't know if staff understand the living wage process as clearly as it was outlined, at least to the board of Niagara Regional Housing. And I say that because we can become, at least enter at the supporter level, and then you say that there needs to be a plan, but we can be at the supporter level for a couple of years until we get to a position, as Councillor Miller was talking about, we can get into a better position on our staffing levels and what we're paying. But I think it would be prudent if we sign up at the supporter level and work towards leader level, and then have a plan on what that looks moving forward. And through the chair, I'm just going to make some commentary here. When we went through it at Regional Housing, they don't, and I'm going to be quite honest here, they don't go and check your contracts and see if all your contractors, there is also what would be a honesty and fairness approach, where they don't have, they being the living wage and the Niagara poverty reduction committee, they don't have the ability to go into a corporation and say, we want to look at all your contracts. It's you signing the certification and saying, we're doing this. And so I think there's an opportunity for us. Like when I look at Kingston and Cambridge and Huron County and Municipality of North Perth, other municipalities are embarking on this. And so I guess I struggle when I see language in the report that says risks to the city becoming a living wage employer. What's the social determinant side of this? So all we're talking about in this report is the finances, but there's nothing on the social determinants of health in here that would say, while this is financially X, socially, this is what it gets us. And I think that's where I struggle with this report is it's all focused on wages. Here's how it's going to hurt us financially. Well, how does it help us from a social economic perspective? We have a strategic plan to become the most livable, dynamic, sustainable city in North America. How does becoming a living wage employer achieve that, or does it not? I don't have the answer to that, but I think, I would have expected at least that we go for the supporter level, and then say that we're going to, over the next 3 or 4 years, we'll have a plan, or next 2 or 3 years, work towards leader. and then hopefully at some point become champion. But I will contest in here, Mr. Chair, that when it talks about how it's going to have an impact, that we're beholden to the $18.17, we can challenge that. We can say, here's where we believe it is, and here's how we're moving towards it. We can show benefits. So at regional housing, I talked about benefits. Does that 1727 include benefits? So the answer was, well, you come up with the formula to show us what the value is, and it'll be attributable to that dollar. So that $18.17 may include additional benefits. So I guess I would rather see the motion to be that we move towards, we immediately apply for the supporter, and that staff come back with a further plan in 2021 on how do we get to at least the leader and what the impact will be. And then I think bring in the Niagara Poverty Reduction Group again, have them come in, and let's ask more questions in 2021 about how are they developing the $18.17? Because I think Cambridge is more expensive to live than Niagara is, and Cambridge is at $16.35. So we can challenge that. So, Councillor Miller, you've been the leader on pushing for this, but I think we have to push above our weight a bit and at least embark on the certification and achieve the supporter level, and then have a plan to move to leader level in the coming years, 2 or 3 years. But I'll leave it to the will of council. I think we've got to take some steps here.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Sendzik. Looking to now Councillor Townsend, followed by Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I agree with all the sentiments that have been said. You know, you do look at our strategic plan, and it's important here for us to be a leader. We're the largest city here in Niagara, and I think it's important for us to set that precedent to our staff and anyone who wants to come work at the city. We want people to work for the city of St. Catharines. We want them to be fairly compensated because you know, it costs money to live. I'm going to ask. I want to make an amendment here on this here, and I want to change it to seek certification. And I want to know, like, I'm hoping Councillor Miller will see it friendly. I know it changes it, but I think that we have an opportunity here to be leaders and to show anyone in this great city that we do believe in fair wages and fair compensation. So I want to put this on the table, and I'm hoping that council will support this.
Okay, Councillor Miller, do you consider that friendly?
Yeah, that's friendly, and I think, you know, that again, I don't think it actually does impact the comprehensive compensation strategy, which is sort of the thrust of the main motion. So I think it does complement it.
Okay. All right, Councillor Porter.
Thank you very much. I support this amendment and the discussion we're having about this. I think it's really important. So Mayor Sendzik talked about having the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network come in to provide like a report to council so that we can ask questions. I think this should be in the motion that it should come. We should request that they come in 2021 to report to us, and hopefully at that time, you know, there'll be another motion, or maybe perhaps we can deal with this tonight, that we have a goal of moving up the ladder in terms of our certification. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Sorrento.
Thank you, Chair Cisco. I'm just looking for a clarification here in the amendment to the amendment. So where Councillor Miller's, I believe the amendment is last sentence, first paragraph says, without seeking certification as a living wage employer. And then Councillor Townsend's amendment is to seek certification at the supporter level. So one is without seeking certification and one is to seek certification. Can I just get a clarification on that, or is that a contradiction between the two Two amendments?
Councillor Miller, so would we be striking that last portion?
Yeah, we would have to strike that, and I certainly support striking it.
Yeah.
From
There's the clarification on that, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want you to know I'm reading.
Excellent.
Thank you. That's it.
All right, Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very good discussion. If I understand correctly, so I'd like some clarification through you from Ms. Pilateri. We can already be certified at that supported level, as the mayor said, because our full-time staff is at that level. Is that correct?
Through your budget chair, correct.
And are there any, I guess, what are the implications? Like it says that we have to have a clear plan or path to get to the higher levels. What happens if for some reason, whatever that happens to be, I don't know, we can't move up to the next level? Are there any negative implications to that, or can we stay at the supported level for some time? Or
Through you, budget chair, it's not dictated the timelines. Obviously, they would be looking for a reasonable timeline of plan, and it could be, as the mayor said, it could be several years out. What would happen is if we got to a certain point in time down the road and we couldn't move forward, we would, have to make the decision that we wouldn't be certified. But I think as you go through this process, they're quite supportive as long as you're moving forward and having, a plan in place. So I think that would be, if we did go this route and we certified at the supporter level, which we can achieve now, it's just to have a plan in place and a reasonable timelines.
Okay. All right, Councillor Littleton.
Thank you. Sorry, I apologize. So I guess I just have a question because we moved this off consent, which is fine. But now we want to actually approve the level. I'm just wondering, I like all of this. I'm just wondering if we could though be able to ask the questions of the group before we do it. I don't know what to do here because again, it was on consent and now we're approving and we're moving to 11. And I have to be honest, I don't understand the entire program and all the ins and outs. So I guess I don't know what my question is, but I think this is a great initiative and I think we need to move this way. And so I thought Councillor Miller's his motion, I was 100% behind that, moving forward, get that strategy in place. But should we jump tonight is my question. I'm not saying we should or should not. I guess I don't know if we should jump to that supporter level, but I love the idea of having the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network come in and talk to us because I'm just a little bit conflicted here.
The option exists that a motion to defer can be made to and a request made to the Niagara Poverty Reduction Network to come and make a presentation. So that opportunity does exist.
Yeah, but I don't want to hold up Councillor Miller's the first part of his motion because I think it's great. Like, let's get moving on that. I just maybe need a little bit more information. I don't know what the rest of council is feeling right now.
Well, if there's a desire, we could also split the motion, approve the first part, and defer the second clause with a request for the NPRN to come and present. That is also an option. I have no idea whether that would pass, but it is an option that is available to council if they wish.
Yeah, so maybe, and then we make sure that they come in Q1 2021, because if it's not going to change anybody's salary, it's just we're getting a certification. Okay, I'm going to leave it. It's going to be the will of council then.
Okay, so if there is a will to any of the councillors that haven't spoken yet, we could split the motion and ask for a deferral on the second clause. The third clause would be moot at that point. But I leave that to council. If no one raises their hand though, then we're going to put the entire motion to a vote. All right, so seeing no additional comments or concerns, I will look to the clerk to call the roll.
Councillor Miller,
Yes.
Counselor Phillips,
Yes. Sorry.
no problem. Counselor Porter,
Yes.
Counselor Sorrento,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Dodge, Counselor Dodge,
Yes.
Mayor Senzik,
Yes, thanks.
Counselor Kushner,
Yes.
Counselor Littleton,
Yes.
Counselor Townsend,
Yes.
Chair Cisco,
Yes.
and that's carried.
All right, so that was the final item on the discussion agenda this evening. There's no in camera, there's no motion arising from in camera, there are no motions. Call for notices of motion. Are there any calls for notice of motion? Mayor Senzik?
Chair, it's not a direct notice of motion. I'll leave it for the report request staff direction, sorry.
Okay, so report requests and directions to staff. We did have a couple from this evening. Councillor Porter had a memo regarding greens fees. Councillor Townsend with the potential for on-street parking permits. Councillor Miller with an update on equity officer position. The request for terms of reference for the budget engagement task force in 2021 for the budget standing committee. Councillor Porter for the quarterly updates on the tree budget. The mayor had one regarding repairs identified in item 8.2 for Garden City. Mayor Senzik, did you have something additional?
Yeah, and through the chair, just for direction to staff, if it's the will of council. At the last budget meeting, we talked extensively, I think, about the capital budget and the need to better articulate the impact of how COVID's changing potentially our business. And what I'll ask the CAO, if I can indulge council, the CAO is, we've only got a couple more budget meetings left. And I think it's important that we at least see some kind of connection to the operating budget and the capital budget that talks about what we learned so far, how our city operations are shifting, and show to the public, because I think we've learned a lot of lessons from COVID, but they're not being presented by staff to council and specifically pointing to, here's what we've learned and here's how this line of business is going to change moving forward. And I think that's going to be an important discussion so that we as council get a better understanding of sort of what operations, whatever they may come to fruition. And I haven't seen it yet. And my expectation is that by the end of this budget, we'll be talking concretely about how the operations are changing and how our city services are even going to shift. Because, Mr. Chair, even things that we've seen at the senior centers and what staff have done with online programming, that's amazing. And I think we need to highlight that as part of the budget process to show that we're going to do things differently moving forward. And this budget is the first iteration of what that should look like. So I'll just leave it there and its direction. And if the CAO wants to provide some summary comment on that, it would be appreciated.
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly we can prepare that. Some of the discussion surrounding when we talked about the capital budget, that was a little bit of priority setting and saying things that have increased in priority and need in our citizens and our community, and the capital budget, some of the changes that we in the report that was published, but we will speak at a future meeting. We'll have that around the capital budget, and we can prepare summary comments and a report that relates to the operating budget. We've seen bits and pieces of it during the COVID updates, but to put it together in the perspective for everyone to see everything that's been accomplished and ways in which we're moving differently certainly would be a benefit. So we will prepare that.
Okay. If there are no other report requests, is this a show of hands or just, or are we calling the roll? Or do we need to do either?
I would do a vote.
Okay.
I would not vote on each separately in this case,
All right.
unless the council wants to request one be voted on separately.
Let's go for a show of hands. All those in favor of the report requests? Opposed? Seeing none, it looked unanimous to me. We have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Miller,
Love to move this one. Glad to do so.
all in favor? Opposed? Then that is carried and we are adjourned. One more time, apologies for being late this evening, folks. Thank you, everybody.